Uh, so before I just go ahead, I just want to quickly recap what we did yesterday, right? So yesterday we talked about machine learning, what machine learning is all about, what are the various types of machine learning, supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement, which obviously you guys were aware. We talked about the model workflow. That was very important to understand. And when we actually executed one of the scripts for regression, we realized the value of the workflow. Then we also talked about the data pre-processing, and within data pre-processing, we talked about how we take care of importing the data sets, importing the libraries. Then we talked about missing data, data categorization, splitting the data into uh, a training set and test set, and finally we also talked about feature scaling. Right? Any questions till yesterday before we go ahead? Does anybody has any questions or any thoughts? Okay. So we also talked about simple regression. We went through a simple regression function, and what was the parameter to find the efficiency of a regression model? Anybody in the group? You remember what was the formula? R2 square. Very good. So R2 square, and what was the objective of regression model? To reduce what? What is that sigma of y minus y predict the whole square? What was it called? Cost function. Very good. So we talked about a simple regression model where we talked about the cost function. How do we reduce the cost function? And using the metrics R2 score, we found out how do you find the efficiency of a model. And if the value is close to 1, that means the model is efficient. Now let us get into a multi-regression model, right? Now, let me open my Python. And okay, I'm already in the multi-regression folder, so that is fine. I cancel this. I go to the files, multiple regression.py. Yeah. Okay. Now here is a data set. Close this. Let me close this. We already did this yesterday. The data set that we're going to use is called 50startups.cs. Now, what does this mean? Is that you have a venture capitalist, a person or a company, an investor, which is investing in startup companies. And he has got information about 50 startups, and he needs to take a decision or needs to come out with a model which will help him to predict which company he should invest in. Which company out of these 50 startups he needs to invest in. And what is the parameter to understand or the parameter to influence the decision to invest, right? So the investor has given details about the 50 startup companies. He has given the details about the amount he spends on R&D, the amount he spends on administration, amount spent on marketing, state, and profit. Okay, so among all these parameters, can you tell me which is the independent variable? Which is the independent variable? And which is the dependent variable? So dependent variable is profit. Yes, okay, very nice. And what about the independent? Deepak is saying R&D. Shubhangi is saying profit. So profit is dependent for sure. So all the other parameters, whether you talk about R&D spend, administration spend, marketing spend, and state, all these are independent variables, right? And so now what we'll going to do is that number one, okay, let's first decide on the data pre-processing steps, then we get into the model. So we'll obviously import the libraries, we'll import the data set, we'll identify the independent dependent variables, which we have done just now. What about, I'm assuming that there is no missing data. So just, so we are good there. What about data categorization? Is data categorization required for this sort of data? Is data categorization required? Yes, anybody? Yes, so which is the text field? So you have these, you have the state field, which is the text, correct. Now state field has got various text like your New York, California. So what are the libraries, what are the functions which we are going to use to convert it into a array of dummy variables? What was the function name? If you remember yesterday I talked about. What are the two functions? One was to convert into serial numbers, and other was to convert into an array of dummy variables. What is that function called? Not autoencoder. Another guess? Anybody? So one was the label encoder, which was to convert into serial numbers, and to convert into dummy variables, we used a function called one hot encoder, right? Correct. So one hot encoder was used to convert it into an array of dummy variables. Fine. What about splitting the data into training and test set? That anyway is required, so I'm not going to ask about that. What about feature scaling? Is feature scaling required? Why do we require feature scaling? Yes, so we require feature scaling because all these R&D spend, administration, marketing spend could have different range of values, right? We are not sure what is the range of value it will have. So it's always desirable that it is always desirable to bring it to a common scale, and that is why feature scaling is required. Okay. So now let's go back to our multiple linear regression function, and we will first import the libraries. Import matplotlib, I will import the pandas. I will also import the R square. Okay. And I will also import my data set. Now, if I go to my data set variable explorer, sorry, I have not imported this yet, pandas. And now I take the data set. Okay. Now, if I go to the data set, this is how my data set looks. The R&D spend, the administration spend, and so on, right? And profit. So this is my data, correct? So I've got around 50 records. Now I know which is my independent variable. I know which is my dependent variable, right? So if I go to X is your X is, let me minimize this. So X is going to be your R&D spend, admin spend, marketing spend, and your state. And your Y is going to be the profit. Okay, we are clear on that. Now we are going to do the feature scaling on the state field. Now what happens if I now go to this value of X? Now you see the very interesting part that the state field, which was in the fourth column, is moved to the first column as an array of 3 dummy variables, because there are 3 countries or 3 states, sorry, it will convert into 3 dummy variables. Okay, so it does it, it moves it to the beginning of the array or beginning of the text. Now, then we do the split into training and test. So we have how much? We have 20% of test data. So 20% of 50 is 10 records. So we have got X train, X test, Y train, Y test. So we already discussed yesterday that we had 4 variables created after the split. Now again here, as we are seen in the simple regression, we are going to use the same linear regression algorithm. And since feature scaling is inbuilt in the algorithm, we don't have to do explicit coding, and that's why we have done the comments here. Okay, we have commented the code, we don't have to write it. Then now I'm doing the modeling. So I finished my data reprocessing steps, I do my modeling. Then I do my predict, and then I find the R-square for y-test y-print, which is around 93%, which is very good, right? Now, one of the important things which happens in multiple regression is not all features have equal impact on the profit. Not all the features have the equal impact on the profit. So we need to identify which are those features, 2 or 3 features, which will have the highest impact on the dependent variable, which is the profit. And that's what I, as a customer, need to know. Which of these variables is having the highest impact on profit? And for that, we use a feature called, it's a feature selection method. We call something called a feature selection. So feature extraction. And this method is called backward elimination. Now I will explain to you what backward elimination is all about. So in statistics, there is something called a p-value, okay, for every feature. Okay. Now, there is something called a significant level, which is generally 0.05, which determines the error rate. Okay, the significant value or the significant level in statistics, which is 0.05. We generally take it as 0.05. So what happens is that there is something called null hypothesis, and there is something called alternate hypothesis. So null hypothesis says that the feature has least impact on the dependent variable, which is your profit. And the alternate hypothesis says that feature has highest impact on the dependent variable. Okay. So what the way the function works is that if my p-value is less than the significant level, if my p-value is less than significant level, that is 0.05, then alternate hypothesis is applicable, which means that particular variable has highest impact or has got a high impact on the profit. If my p-value is greater than 0.05, then null hypothesis is applicable, which means that particular variable has no impact on profit. So using backward elimination, what I do is, suppose I got feature F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, F6, okay, and I calculate the p-value. So there is a function which is used in statistics to calculate the p-value. It's called the OLS summary function in Python. So 0.08, suppose 0.07, say 0.08, 0.09, 1.2, 1. Just as an example. So what I will do is, I will take the feature with the highest p-value, which is more than 0.05. Now, in this case, since F6 has got the highest p-value, I will eliminate F6. So I will have F1, F2, F3, F4, F5. Okay. Now, what I do is, I again recalculate the p-value. The p-value will not be the same. You recalculate the p-value for all the features and again find out the p-value which is the highest, greater than 0.05. So you continue this elimination till you get the 2 or 3 features where the p-value is less than 0.05, or there could be even one feature, or there could be 2 features where the value is less than 0.05. Now, what does that mean? Okay. So when I say feature extraction, why I do this? Because these 2-3 features is explaining, or it is contributing maximum to the profit. It is contributing maximum to the profit. So that's why I need to decide on these 2-3 features which will have the highest impact on profit, and that will be the deciding factor for the client to say on what criteria I need to invest in these companies. And we use the feature extraction method called backward elimination. And if you remember, I talked to you about adjusted R-square. This is the function for adjusted R-square, where n is the number of samples and p is the number of features. So typically what happens, as the number of features increases, as p increases, okay, n minus p reduces, so adjusted R-square goes on reducing. Okay, so what happens through backward elimination when you do, as the p reduces, okay, the adjusted R-square also tends to increase, and then you will get at a point where at this number of features, you know that you have the highest adjusted R-square, and those features, that is the value of p, will decide the criteria which will have, or the number of features which will have the highest impact on the profitability or the dependent variable. This is how we use adjusted R-square in multiple regression to find out the optimum number of features which is having the highest impact on profit, and that's where you use the process of backward elimination. Is this clear to all of you? Is this clear to all? What is backward elimination? Can I get a quick yes or no on the screen? And what I want you all to do as a homework is, I will provide you the scripts. You can always run it when you, at your time. I want you guys to run this script. Okay, now I've already run till here, but if you run this script on the bottom, what it is doing, it is calculating the p-value, finding out the p-value which is highest, more than 0.05, eliminating that feature, then again eliminating one feature, again eliminating one feature, again eliminating one feature, till you get the feature which is having the highest impact on profit. Okay, so you have to go through this. I want you to try this out. You go through all the features, eliminate one by one through the p-value. I'll just show you an example. Let me run this. I'm just eliminating one dummy variable which is not required. Now, if I run this equation, so what I'm trying to do here, I'm adding x0 as part of the first column, which is basically having a value of 1. Okay. So I'm just adding this. Okay. Now I will just show you. I'm going to take all the variables. And what I see here is the p-value. This is the p-value. So what I'll do is I will take the highest p-value, which is how much is the highest p-value? 0.990. So what I will do is I will remove x2. Okay. And then I will again take 0, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 4, 5. So I've eliminated x2. I take x3, x4, x5. Again, rerun this function. And again, I will get this p-value. Take the highest p-value, eliminate that, take the remaining variables, again recalculate the p-value, go on till you get the lowest. So I want you guys to try this out on your own. Okay. So you have to find out the p-value after running function and eliminate one by one till you get the one with the lowest p-value. And that is how we used in statistics. We use a hypothesis which decides which features will have the highest impact on the profit. Okay. So that's a very interesting part of multiple regression. So if there is no questions, I will go ahead. So let me see. I hope there's any questions. Okay, let me see. Fine. So all of you have understood. Very good. Now the next thing which I would like to cover is something called a polynomial regression. Okay. All this code, everything is, I will share this PPT with all of you. Now, what is a polynomial regression? So typically, many of the times what happens, you may have a situation where the correlation between the dependent and the independent variable may not be linear. Okay, it could be more of a parabolic or a curve. So typically, if you have an equation where you have a single independent variable and obviously single dependent single independent variable, and you have something like b0 plus b1x plus b2x square plus b3x cube and all that. So you have got a powers of x, okay, which basically decides whether it's a parabolic function or not. Okay. So what I will do is I will try to run it and I will show you. Let me close this. I will restart my kernel, which means I will initialize all the values. Meanwhile, I change my folder to regression, polynomial regression. Okay. I select folder and there is a file called polynomial regression.py and my data is like this: position, salaries. Okay, so my data set says the HR of the company has given me this data. He has given me the position of a person in the company, the level, which is an analyst, and his salary. So if my level 1 is 45,000, junior consultant, senior consultant, manager, country manager, region manager, partner, senior partner, and so on. So I want to use this model as a manager for me to predict the salary for somebody who is between maybe 6 and 7 level. If I want to put him between 6 and 7 level, the model should tell me what is the salary that I should give as an HR manager. Okay, so model should come out with that right prediction. So now in this data, can somebody tell me, is this a linear equation? No, forget that. Can you just tell me which is the independent variable and which is the dependent variable? Which is the independent variable and which is the dependent variable? Small. Salary is your dependent variable and position is your independent variable. What about the level? Level is dependent variable. See, level and position is linked, right? So one is business analyst, two is junior consultant, right? It's not, they're actually linked. So you don't have to take both as independent variables. You take only the level because that's the numeric part, right? So you only take level as the independent variable and your salary becomes your dependent variable. Now, apparently, if you see through this equation, with the level, the obviously salary is increasing. Okay, I would have thought it is a linear equation. But then I will try the linear equation. And if I see that the linear equation does not fit, then I will try the parabolic or the polynomial regression. Okay, so now that's what I'm going to do here. So if I take my data set, I import my libraries. Okay, then I import my data set. I identify my, sorry. I identify my independent variable. I identify my dependent variable. Okay. And then for time being, I'm not doing any splitting and all that because it's a small set of records. I'm just trying to test the equation with the existing data. So what I'll do is I will take the X and Y and I will train the model using linear regression. Okay, I have done the training, and then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to plot the linear regression, see how it works. Now, if you see the data, the predicted line is obviously linear, right? Because it's a linear regression, but the actual data is not linear. Okay, you will see that the actual data is not linear. That means your linear regression function will not work here. So, and obviously the cost function will be very, very high because the sigma of y minus y predict will be very, very high. So why don't I try with polynomial function? So in polynomial function, one of the parameters that I can vary is the degree. Now degree decides whether it is 2 means x square, x1 plus x2 square, x1 square, 3 means x1 plus x2 square plus x1 cube, 4 means x1 squared, x3, x1 cube, and x1 is to 4. So depending on the degree of x, I will vary the degree to see for which degree I get the most accurate prediction. For which degree of x I get the highest or the most accurate prediction. So what I do is first, let me start with x equal to 2. And let me run this. And I visualize the polynomial regression. Now with xx, if I see that I get a parabolic pattern, but again, I see a lot of issue or the cost function is still very high because there is a gap between the y and the y predict, right? So what I will do is I will make this 3. Let me re-execute this. I rerun the polynomial regression, train the model. I visualize this now. It is much better, though it's a parabolic, and if you see the cost function is lesser than the earlier one, but there is still scope for improvement. So let me try x equal to 4. Now, when I try degree x equal to 4 and I run this, this is a perfect fit. So if I go up to x raised to 4, so I go on varying the degree or the power till the time I get the most accurate function or the accurate accuracy, highest accuracy or the lowest cost function, right? And this is the way I will try the various degrees. Now, degree 4, give me the most optimum value. Now, having done that, now if I have to do the linear regression, now if I want to check that for 6.5 years of level, 6.5 level, what is the salary that the linear regression will predict? It is predicting around 330,378. And if I see my level 6 is 150K, level 7 is 200K, and my 330K is somewhere between level 8 and 9. So my linear prediction is not giving the right prediction. Now let me try with the polynomial regression. If I execute the polynomial regression with again the same 6.5, the value comes to around 159K, and that is perfectly fine. I mean, it will not be 100% fine, but I can say that, okay, this model for 600.5, it gives me a value of 159K. So that means this, in this particular case, the polynomial regression algorithm is the best fit for this set of data. Is this clear to all of you? How I have compared the linear regression and polynomial regression and selected the degree which gave me the most optimum prediction. Can you see what will result? Degree is 10. Okay, let me try. .5 means, that means I'm trying to predict if I'm got 605 as my level, what will be my predicted salary? 6.5 is the level. So 6 is my level, 7 is my level, 8. So if I'm trying to hire somebody who falls between 6 and 7 as far as my HR table goes, then I need to predict what is the salary I should get for a person who is falling between a 6 and 7 level. Okay, somewhere in between. Okay. So now if I try, let me try degree equal to 10. Somebody's asked, let me try. Okay, let me do this. I think after certain optimum, it's not going to change. Let me try. If I visualize this, yeah, it's going to be the same. So whatever you're getting 4 is not going to make a difference, right? So you have to find the optimum degree which will give you the highest or the most accurate prediction, right? Is this clear to all of you? Can I get a quick yes or no on the screen? Okay, great. Yeah, linear regression was overfitting, right? Linear regression was a case where it was, I will say it was underfitting, because obviously it was not fitting at all. In the case of overfitting, when you say overfitting, would have been a case where you would have had large number of test errors. Here I have not done any split between a test and a training. Okay, but again, obviously with linear regression, my error is very high. Whether I use training or test, if I use linear regression, the error is very high. That's why I have to use polynomial regression, right? Any other questions? Okay. So now we have covered regression. There are various other regression models like decision tree, random forest. So maybe you can, I mean, since we have limited scope, I'm not going to cover that. But now I'm going to get into something called a classification. Okay. Now, what is classification? So as we all know, so in classification, as I said, the label data, which is your independent variable, is having a discrete value. That means it will have a value of a 0 or 1, or it could have a discrete set of values. This is an example of a vertebrate data set, which is one of the very popular data sets which people start off when they do any machine learning workshop. And you have these various features, and there is a label which decides whether it's a mammal, reptile, fish, or a bird, right? So there are 4 or 5 distinct set of values. Okay. Now the workflow, whether it is on regression or classification, remains the same. We are going to follow the same concept: data pre-processing, basically training the model, predicting the value of y, and calculating the model accuracy. Okay, the principle absolutely remains the same. So in our example today, we will talk about 3 important models. One is the logistic regression. Second is the decision tree. And the third is the random forest. Okay. Now, what is logistic regression? Okay, we will go and explain it through the data set. So what I'm going to do now, I will again initialize the kernel, restart the kernel. Just 1 minute. So now I'm going to go to a folder called classification. Okay. I selected a logistic regression folder. Okay. Now my data set is, this is my logistic regression script, and this is my data set. Okay. Now what my data set says is that, I think this I already explained to you as during the earlier stage. Okay, you have an automotive company, and there are people who are entering into a automotive portal using their user ID, and they are entering their profile, and they are trying to click on a button whether they're going to buy a particular car or they are not going to buy a particular car. And as a data analyst or as a data scientist, I have to come out with a model which will predict, based on the age and salary, what is the likelihood that a person is going to buy the car or not going to buy the car. So 0 is basically is not going to buy the car, and 1 is essentially is going to buy the car. Okay. Now, one of the things which the client has told me is, please don't worry about the gender. You don't worry about the sex, whether it's male and female. We are only concerned with the age and the salary. Now, after having said that, can somebody tell me which is your independent variables? Which is going to be your independent variables? Which is going to be your independent variables? Anybody? Gender, age. Gender. And which is the, first of all, which is your dependent variable? Dependent variable is, no, my dependent variable is purchased. This is a classification data, and my dependent variable is purchased, 0 or 1. Is going to buy a car or not going to buy the car. Okay. And my independent variables, if gender would have been my criteria, I would have taken gender, age, and salary. If gender has to be excluded as per my client requirement, I will take only age and salary. Okay. And user ID is it not an independent variable? Is user ID not an independent variable? Why it is not an independent variable? Yeah, because user ID it's basically with every login, right? With every login, the user is going to change. How is it going to have an impact on the decision to buy a car or not, right? So user ID has no impact on the decision of whether it's going to buy the car or not. Okay. So now, what about data characterization? Is it required as part of data pre-processing? Why do you not require? Gender is text, correct? But gender is text, but gender, I would have considered it for, yeah, gender is not impacting because I have excluded that in my analysis. If the client would have told me to include gender in my analysis, then I would have considered that for data characterization. And for gender, do I have to use label encoder, one hot encoder, or just one hot encoder? If I'd have considered gender, which function I would have used to convert it into a numeric format? Label encoder, right? I don't have to, because there are only two values, 0 and 1, correct? So I would have used label encoder to convert into male and female with 0 and 1 value. Okay. So now if I go back to my script, and what about feature scaling? Is feature scaling required? Yes, feature scaling is required because you got age and salary, okay, which have got very different scales. Very good. So now let's go back to our equation. So I will import my NumPy library, then I will import Matplotlib, I will import pandas, okay. Then I will import my data set. So if I see my data set under variable explorer, I see this is my data set, and obviously at this point of time, there are no missing data, so we don't have to bother about it. We identify which is the independent variable, and we identify which is the dependent variable, right? So, so my X is age and salary, and Y is my decision whether it's going to buy a car or not going to buy a car. Now, in this case, of course, we'll have to split the data. Let's do the splitting. So I got X test, which is around 100 records because it's 25% test data, and X train is 75%, which is 300 records, right? And again, here, there's one difference. In the case of linear regression, feature scaling was already inbuilt as part of the algorithm. So you didn't have to do explicit coding. But in the case of this one, in the case of logistic regression, you have to do feature scaling explicitly because it is not inbuilt. Okay. So that is why your code is not commented. So I have to execute this code. One minute, what happened? Okay. So now if I see the value of X train, these the values are big, I use standard scalar functions. See, the value is very small. If I use the value of X test, again, I see a very small value. So I basically scaled it down to a common scale using the standard scalar function. Then I finish my data pre-processing steps. I get into the modeling phase. So in the modeling phase, I train the model with my independent and dependent variables. I do a Y prediction. So what could be the possible values of Y prediction? What could be the possible values of Y prediction? Anybody? What could be the possible values of Y prediction? Zero or one. Perfect. So your Y prediction could be or will be always 0 and 1. Okay. Now to measure the accuracy of a classification model, we use something called a confusion matrix. In the case of regression, we had used the R2 square, we use the adjusted R square, okay, for a multiple regression function. Okay. In the case of classification, we use something called a confusion matrix, and I will explain to you what a confusion matrix is all about. So now you have two values. One is the predicted value of Y, and you have the actual value of Y. And this I'm considering for the test data, because I'm going to use test data to measure the accuracy of my model. Now imagine this is 0 and 1 for predicted value. He's not going to buy the car, he's going to buy the car. And the actual value 0 and 1, he's not going to buy the car, he's going to buy the car. Okay. So imagine there are 35 cases or 35 samples out of total 35 plus 50 plus 5 plus 10, 100. Now there are 35 cases where the model is predicting that he's not going to buy the car, while the actual data also says that he's going to buy the car. He's not going to buy the car. So we are good. So the model is behaving as per the actuals. The model is behaving as per the actuals. No problem. Let's take this 50 cases. We have got predicted value 1. That means he's going to buy the car in 50 samples and actually also is going to buy the car. So again, the model is working fine. But let us look at this. There are 55 cases where he's predicted that he's going to buy the car, but actually is not going to buy the car. Okay, so this is an error. And here there is another error where you have predicted that he does not have the car, but actually is buying the car. So I will explain to you why this is red and yellow for now, but just for this particular slide, the way we evaluate the metrics is something called the accuracy and the error. So I will say that my accuracy in this particular case is 85%, that is 35 plus 50 divided by 100, and my error rate is obviously 15%. Okay. Now in industry, when you have any set of data, you need to use confusion metrics to find out the accuracy. And as I said, the higher the accuracy, the better the recommended model. So what we typically do, we use that same set of data and we use all the different types of models, whether we use classical decision tree, we use random forest, we use naive Bayes probability, or even if we use support vector matrix. These are the various models that we use. So you try to run the various models with the same set of data and try to find out the metrics or find out the model which is giving the highest accuracy. And that is a model which you will recommend to your client. Okay. So in this particular case, we are getting an accuracy of 85% is okay, but I will typically we will recommend maybe if it's 85% above or 90%, you will recommend 90% above is most recommended as a model to the customer. Okay, but this is just to give an example how a matrix is calculated using confusion matrix. Now let me convert this, or let me use some other way and explain you. Now let me look at an example of healthcare. In the healthcare industry, suppose you have a data, you have various features, and if you remember, I told you yesterday that there could be two possible values of dependent variable. Either he has cancer or he does not have cancer. Let's take two different values. He has cancer or he does not have cancer. So imagine plus means that he has cancer, minus he does not have cancer. True class is your actual value and this is your predicted value. Okay. So true positive means that the model is predicting that he has cancer, but actually he has cancer. So that is perfectly fine. So model for those set of data is giving you the right prediction. So it is called true positive. Let's come to true negative. So the model is predicting that he does not have cancer and actually also he does not have cancer. So we are good. So model is behaving as per the actual data. Now look at this one. Here I'm saying that a patient, I'm predicting that the person or the patient does not have cancer, but I'm predicting he has got cancer. So prediction is saying that he has got cancer, but actually he does not have cancer. This is an error, but it is a less critical error because actually he does not have cancer, right? But again, it's an error for sure, but it is less critical error. That's why it's called the type 1 error. But the most critical part, that's why it's in red, is you have predicted that he does not have cancer, but actually he has got cancer. When the actual data would have saying that he's got cancer, but the model is actually predicting that he does not have cancer, this is the most fatal case. And no model should work in this way. This will give you a very high error, which you need to reduce the false negative. If this is high, then obviously your accuracy will go up, will go down, right? And your main aim is to see how you can eliminate false negative. That's also called the type 2 error, and the false positive, which is type 1 error. Okay, so this is how you basically try to find out the true positive, true negative, false positive, and false negative is the most critical part which we need to eliminate. That means the model your model should be such that it reduces the false negative signs or the numbers. Any questions on this? Have you understood this? False positive, true negative. Is this clear to all of you? It does not matter, yeah. It really doesn't matter. So you can take this bit true or this predicted, but generally this is how we use it. So this is the true class and this is the predicted class. Okay. So this is a true class, and so prediction is always in the horizontal and the true class is on the vertical. Yeah. So have you all understood what is true positive, true negative, false positive, false negative? Okay. Now there are two more metrics which I would like to highlight here. So I talked about the classification accuracy. So we call TP, TN, FP, FN. So TP and TN. So TP plus TN divided by total is your classification accuracy. Misclassification rate or error rate is FP plus FN divided by total. There are two important words. There are two important terms called the recall and the precision. So precision says when model predicted is true class, how often it was right. That means true prediction divided by total of true prediction. That means TP divided by TP plus FP. And recall is TP divided by TP plus FN. That is how did I classify? So this is TP divided by TP plus FN. This becomes your recall. So obviously, if your model has to be recommended to your client, you have to ensure your accuracy, prediction, and your recall is at least 90%. So all these three parameters are key to decide which model should I recommend to my customer. Okay, so this is the way we calculate the confusion metrics, and we call it as a key performance indicators. KPI is the key performance indicators: classification accuracy, misclassification rate, precision, and recall. Okay, is this clear to all? Is this clear to all? Yes, yes. For multi-classification also it will work. So is this clear to all? Okay. So now let us go back to our slide. And now I'm going to calculate the confusion matrix. So what I'm doing is to my confusion matrix function, I'm basically giving y-test and y-pred as my inputs, right? And I'm calculating the confusion matrix. So in this case, confusion matrix is my accuracy is 65 plus 24 divided by 100, which is 89%. So for this set of data, if I use the logistic regression, I get an accuracy of 89%. Okay. Now, if I want to visualize this in a graph, in a simple regression, we saw how there was a predicted line and how the dots were away from the line. So how do you calculate the cost function? Similarly, if I want to visualize this of the training set, so what you see here is a linear line. This linear line is called the prediction boundary. And in the case of logistic regression, this prediction boundary is straight line. And whatever you see this, so whatever is on the left of the straight line is the predicted value of 0. That means he's not going to buy the car. And to the right of the prediction boundary, the green one shows that he's going to buy the car. So you will have the red dots in red, which is okay. There are green dots in green, which is okay. But there are green dots in red and there are red dots in green. So these are the type 1 and the type 2 errors. So while this gives you a very good representation graphically, it will tell you that for this particular training set, it gives you the type 1 and the type 2 errors, depending on the graphical representation. If I want to do with the test set, when I run this with the test set, you see here, again, it works pretty well with the test data. So, but if you see count the number of greens in red and number of reds in green, there'll be total around 11. Okay, that's what we saw, the efficiency of 89% or the error rate of 11%. So this is how you represent or visually try to see how the model works with this specific set of data. And obviously use confusion metrics and use metrics like the accuracy, you use precision and recall, and there is something called F1 rate. F1 rate is again the average of precision and recall. Okay, we call the F1 classification. So this is how we measure the metrics of a classification data. Okay, any questions on this point of time? So are we all clear on logistic regression? Okay. What is ROC? Sorry. Dr. Shishir Narang, what is ROC? Sorry, I didn't get that. Okay. So let me go to the next one. I'm not sure. Can you explain for everybody's benefit? I don't know what is this receiver operating characteristic curve. Can you unmute and speak? Can you please unmute and speak? I need to check on this, probably I'm not aware of this. Okay, fine. I would request you to please unmute and speak. It becomes easier and always writing on text. Otherwise, there's no collaboration happening. Collaboration should happen by talking, not by just writing. Please unmute and speak. That makes it easier. True positive rate or false positive rate. Possibly it's a curve. Okay, fine. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, it gives you a curve which calculates those 4 parameters. That's fine. So you cannot unmute, Pankaj sir. Hello. Problem. Pankaj Mishra sir, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please.
So why don't we unmute the people? If we mute, people cannot talk.
Actually, sir, if they raise their hand, I will unmute them one by one. If all the people will.
Can you please unmute Dr. Sushil Narang, please?
Yes, yes. Dr. Sushil Narang, you can talk.
Yes, Dr. Sushil Narang, what is this exactly?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for allowing me to speak. It is definitely a very interesting lecture that you are delivering. I was very much confused about the classification models whenever I try to create. There is like this is ROC curve, basically a graph that shows the performance of any classification model, at different classification thresholds. Like I said, it plots only 2 parameters.
Okay.
True and false positives, and in fact there is one more term that comes in for this, that is like an AOC. It's a part of like AUC. It's an area under ROC curve, somewhat like it measures the entire 2-dimensional area that is covering under ROC curve, and that basically suggests some performance of the classification model. I exactly do not know much about that, so I was just asking.
So you're saying in ROC, what all does it plot?
It's a plot between the true positive and false positive, and there is some
false positive,
that is measured under this particular curve, which is called AUC. So it is just like it gives you some probability that the model, how does it rank the positive impact. I don't know exactly, sir. I cannot.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's a good info for all of us. So I mean, we can all explore that. So in MATLAB, I think that's, is that used in MATLAB?
No, sir, it can be created in Python also.
Okay.
It's
a concept, right? So ROC. Okay, basically you can find the true positive and false positive. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about true positive and false positive, so essentially if I go back, this is my true positive and this is my false positive. Okay, that means it will give you the precision. See, when I take true positive divided by true positive by false positive, it gives you my precision.
Yeah.
If I'm taking true positive and false negative, it gives you my recall. So if you're talking of the ROC, if you're talking of the prediction of TP and FP, we're actually talking of precision. I think that's what I think is the representation you must be referring to.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, these are the metrics by which you can calculate. How you want to represent that is different. Okay. Yeah, Dr. Sudha, I think MATLAB also. I think MATLAB is. I think any platform you can get as long. I mean, if it's related to precision, is that correct, Dr. Sudha Gupta? Is it related to precision? What is your idea about ROC? Maybe you can. Okay, fine. So you got it right, Doctor. So essentially, I think if you're talking of TP and FP, it will be more on the precision, right? That's how you'll be probably using the ROC. So it's just a representation of all these, one of these 4 parameters. Okay.
Right, sir. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Please raise your hand in case you have any questions so that sir can unmute you guys. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So now let's get back to the next model, which is decision trees. Okay. Now, what happens in a decision tree is if you look at a decision tree, the very concept, you have a root and you have the various nodes, and finally you have the leaf, and the leaf will suggest whether a person, this is the value of the dependent variable, right? So imagine in this case, if you take the last set of data, you have x1 is your age, x2 is your salary, which are two independent variables, and your dependent variable is then green or red. That means either he's going to buy the car, which is 1, or he's not going to buy the car, which is 0. So now there is a decision tree algorithm, which is again very popular. I mean, it is not very popular. It's not used because there is a limitation of decision tree. I'll come to that. But for now, what happens is there is an ID3 algorithm. It's a very popular algorithm. And there is something called information gain, and also something called an entropy. Okay, entropy is a measure of how easy or difficult for you to classify the data. Okay, and higher the entropy, more difficult it is for you to classify the data into the various values of dependent and the dependent variables, the various values of, it's very difficult to predict the data. So what happens is in information gain is a statistical value. So you calculate, just you had the P1, P value in the case of features, you have an information gain. You calculate the information gain for both X1 and X2. And what is information gain? Information gain leads to higher homogeneity of the data. So it will try to split in such a way that it will try to grade all the greens together, all the reds together, again all the reds together, green and red. So it will try to do the split using this concept called information gain. And so higher the information gain, that means higher the homogeneity, less is the entropy. That is how they are inversely proportional. So typically what happens is wherever the information gain is higher between X1 and X2, the split or the root, the split between the nodes from the root level happens with that particular feature. So if my X1 or X2, whichever is having the highest information gain, in this particular case, X2 was having the highest information gain. That's why the split happens through X2. And then it creates the decision tree like this. And ultimately, whenever there is a new set of values of X1 and X2, it will tell you what is the predicted value. So it will come through here. If X2 is greater than 60, it will come. X1 less than 50, it will come here. If X2 is greater than 60, again X1 less than 70, it will come like. So this split happens, and the classifier will decide the split based on the information gain. So the information gain is an important parameter in statistics, which helps you to decide on which attribute you're going to split your decision tree. Okay. So one of the limitations of decision tree is something called overfitting. And if you have heard of underfitting, overfitting, that is okay. It is called the bias. Okay. So in the case of overfitting, variance and bias, right? There are two features. In the case of underfitting, what happens is you tend to get a high number of training and test errors. In the case of just fitting, you get a very low number of training errors and low number of test errors. In the case of overfitting, you get low number of training errors, but you get high number of test errors. So during the testing, that the efficiency or the accuracy tends to reduce, and that's where decision trees has been found to be a sort of a bottleneck. So it creates an overfitting issue, and then I will come to how it has been, how this particular limitation has been taken care in machine learning. But for now, let us try to see here what it says in classification trees. We use concept of information gain, So constructing a decision is all about finding the attribute that returns the highest information gain, that is the most homogeneous branches. The result is the information gain or decrease in entropy. Split of the attribute happens based on the one having the highest information gain. That's how the ID3 algorithm works. So if I go back to my script, now let me go back to my script, and I will again, I will select my folder. I will, where is this? Sorry. Okay, sorry, I'm here. I will go to this one. I will go to decision tree classification. I will do select folder, push this back. And what I'm going to do now, let me restart the kernel. Okay, now if I go to files, so now I'm going to use decision tree classification. Now here also, I'm going to use the same data set. As I told you, I'm going to use the same data set, and using decision tree model, I will try to again calculate the accuracy. So using the decision tree model, I will calculate the accuracy. So what I do is, I start again, I import my libraries. Import pandas. Then I import my data set. I take my X, I take my Y. Everything we had done earlier, no change. No change. I've done my data processing. Here I'm using the decision tree classifier, and I'm using a criteria called entropy. And using the decision tree classifier, I'm now training the model and trying to create a decision tree based on the information gain. And then I predict the Y, and I calculate the confusion matrix. Now, if I calculate the confusion matrix, my confusion matrix, my accuracy comes to 91%. So if I've seen that for the same set of data, when I use logistic regression, I got an accuracy of 89%, but when I use the decision tree, I got accuracy of 91% with the same set of data. Okay, so if I want to compare logistic and decision tree, I will prefer decision tree as a recommended model. Okay, but decision tree has got, as I told you, it leads to overfitting, and to overcome this overfitting problem, the data scientists came out with something called a model called random forest. And this random forest is also called the ensemble method, and sometimes it is also called the aggregator method. So I will explain to you how this model works, random forest. Okay, so let me explain to you very nicely. You'll come to know.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can you explain it again? Like what is the relation with of this information gain with this entropy?
So entropy is a parameter which is used in decision function, which will, the algorithm will calculate the information. So they're inversely proportional. So you will calculate the information gain, and that information gain is a statistical parameter. And based on the information gain, you will do the split of the node. So whether you want to split on X1, X2, you are going to split based on the information gain value for that particular attribute. And entropy is a parameter which is used in that algorithm.
Okay. Sir, in this function decision tree classifier, I was there is one more option that we can select for criteria. It is gimme. What is that, sir?
Yeah, gimme is another function which is used, but I've never seen that being used because we typically use random forest. Okay, we generally don't use decision tree classifier. I will show you how the random forest classifier it is used.
Right, sir. Right,
Yeah.
sir. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's imagine that now one of the parameters in random forest is to decide how many decision trees you're going to take. Okay. Now random forest still works on the concept of decision trees, but the behavior is a bit different. I mean, it works on the concept of aggregation. So the way it works is like this. So now I decide as a data scientist how much decision trees I need to take to evaluate my data. And this obviously comes to a lot of experience. You could have 25, 40, 50, whatever, 100 also we have used. And that comes to a lot of experience. And obviously more the decision trees, it becomes more computational intensive if you have millions and millions of records, thousands of 10,000s of records, right? But again, here, the decision you have to take as a data scientist, what should be my optimum number of decision trees? Okay. So what I do is I take decision tree. Suppose I decide that I will take 5 decision trees. Okay. So I say D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. And in this case, you have your data which had age, salary, and purchase, yes or no, right? And suppose you have got 1,000 records, out of which 700 records are training set and 300 records are test set. Okay. So what I do is first, I take the 700 records and I decide there are 5 decision trees. So using a function, I mean, using first what the random tree forest does, it will first split it up into this 700 records into whatever that value. Okay, 700. Okay. So it creates this 700 records is split in all the 5 decision trees, right? And then I run this 100 with this decision tree 1, come out with a pattern. I run this 200 with DT2, come out with a pattern. I run 100 with D3, come out with a pattern. I run this 100 with D4, come with some pattern, 200 again, so on. So I run it with the 5 decision trees. Now what I am doing is I take the first set of test data. I mean the first record I will take. I will take the first record of test data and then I take the age and salary. I feed into D1. I feed into D2. I feed into D3, D4, and D5. So once I enter these values of age and salary to in each of these decision trees, I come out with a predicted value of whether it's going to buy a car or not. Suppose this gives you 0. The age and salary, when it enters in D2, it gives you 1. When age and salary is given to D3, it gives you 1. When age and salary gives to D4, it gives you 0. And again, here it gives you 1. So what decision random forest does, it works on the principle of the highest vote. So it sees the one which is having the highest occurrences of 1 or 0. And then it says for this case, my value is going to be 1. So for this set of new first test record, my predicted value is going to be 1. Then I take my second test record, do the same process. Feed into D1, find the predicted value, D2, D3, D4, D5, and I get the one with the highest vote. This is how a random forest works. Okay. So if I see here so you have random subset 1, random subset 2, random subset 3, decision tree 1, 2, 3. You find out the predicted value, you aggregate and take the final prediction based on the highest vote. So this is how it says: pick up key data points from the training set, build the decision trees along with the key data points, choose the number of trees you want to build. Okay, choose the number of trees you want to build and take these data points from the training set and build a decision tree associated with these data points. For a new data point, make each one of your trees predict the category to which the data belongs and assign the new data point to the category that wins the majority vote. Okay, so this is how you basically use the random forest to calculate or to predict the value, and this has found to be more effective compared to a decision tree. And I will show you that how by varying the number of decision trees, your accuracy increases. Okay, so any questions on this principle? Have you guys understood what is this random forest before I actually show it on the screen? Sorry. Where am I? Any questions? Have you guys understood? What reason can be attributed for this? What mathematical scientific reason can be attributed for the improved change in accuracy between various classifiers? Okay, so basically, again, as I said, we use, in the case of random classification, we are again using the concept of classification tree, but what we are varying is the number of decision trees. And the random forest classifier is actually, I'll just show you the code. Let me close this. Let me. Sorry. Let me go to the classification random forest. Okay. Okay, and let me restart the kernel. Okay. So let me execute this and show you. So first of all, let me first import the libraries, which I've already done earlier. Same thing, data set, X and Y. How to value the value of K? Again, through experience, I said number of decision trees. I'll show you. Then let me just show you. So now, for example, I split the data here, okay, which I've done. And now I do the feature scaling. Okay, now here what I do is I use the random forest classifier. And in this random forest classifier, if you see, the only difference what is going to be happening in the case of decision tree classifier, I use criteria equal to entropy and random state. Okay, but in the case of random tree classifier, there's one additional parameter called number of estimators, which is the number of decision trees that I'm going to decide. And you generally start with 10, you start with 20, 30, 40, 50, and you will come to a stage after which there's a threshold after which your accuracy never increases. And that is the number of decision trees. So you can basically write an algorithm to do a looping and find out through a curve as to which is the value which is giving the highest accuracy for which number of decision trees. So you try out various number of decision trees and then you find out the highest accuracy. So for now, in this case, let us take, in our case, let's start with 10 decision trees and I'm going to execute this. I'm training the model with 10 decision trees. Yeah. Let me bring it down. And then I'm doing the prediction. And now I'm calculating the confusion matrix. So what is my confusion matrix? The confusion matrix, it gives you my efficiency, accuracy of 91%, right? With 10 decision trees, it has given me the same accuracy as even the normal if I've used a decision tree classifier. There also I got an accuracy of 91%. Now let us try with decision trees, say 20. And I retrain the model. Do the prediction, calculate the confusion matrix. Can you see here that now my accuracy has gone up to 92%? As I increase the number of decision trees from 10 to 20, the accuracy of the model increased from 91 to 92%. Now let me try with 30. And I execute this. And I calculate the confusion matrix. Again, it is giving me 92%. There's not much of a change when I selected 30 as my number of decision trees. Now let me use 40 now. So let me use 40. With 40, I got an accuracy of 94%. With 40, I got an accuracy of 94% as against 93% for 30. Let me try to make it 45. And retry this. Okay, find out the CM. It is again come back to 93. Right? Let me try 50 now once. And I do CM 92%. See, now if you see that as I go on increasing the number of decision trees, the accuracy is not increasing further. So the optimum number of decision trees in this particular set of data, I found where my number of decision trees was 40, where I got more or less the highest accuracy of 94%. So this is the way I have to vary the number of decision trees based on the data and find out with the matrix with the highest accuracy. Is this clear to all of you? Is this clear to all? Optimal number of decision trees advanced. I mean, again, it comes to experience for that specific set of data. But again, we have seen that people have used decision trees 50, 100 and come out with different efficiency, right? But yes, as I said, as we increase the decision trees, initially the efficiency will increase, but gradually after that, it's not going to increase, right? So that's how it's a trial and error method. There was one question of if there are even number of decision trees, it will do some calculation and I think I don't know the exact way it does it, but yes, it tries to find out some way to does some I don't know the exact formula, but it does way to find out the optimal value. So it does it in some way in that particular algorithm. Okay. Anything else? Is this clear to all of you how the decision random forest works? Can I get a quick yes or no on the screen? Okay. Sir, do you want me to cover a bit of ANN? I've covered the machine learning models because I don't know how much of ANN we know.
Yes, sir. You can continue if you want. You can.
Okay, so I just wanted to know how much of, so are people aware of forward propagation, backward propagation, all that has been considered? Have you all gone through that? What is an epoch? Then I can show you one data set directly. Because if your fundamentals are clear, then I don't want to repeat that. Can anybody from the participants tell me, all of you are aware, or you have gone through this concept of activation functions, epochs, and all that, the various activation functions? The fundamentals are clear. You have heard about the hidden layers. Okay, let me just quickly go through some slides. Maybe it's a repeat and I will not spend too much time, but I would like to show you one or two use cases, right? So let me just quickly go through a presentation which I have. I will skip. Okay. So we all know why we have an artificial. So can somebody tell me why ANN has become so important? Why ANN is used than conventional machine learning models? Can anybody tell me why ANN used today? Or any neural networks for that matter? So when you have a lot of non-linear relationship, perfect. So when you have a lot of non-linear relationship, when you have a lot of complexity in the data, when you have a large volume of non-complexity, non-linear data, we have to use ANN, artificial neural networks. And artificial neural networks, you all know, comes from the concept of neurons, okay, which is equivalent to what you see on your, which is your the brain cells. And typically, if you're talking about classification or even regression, you will have various features, right? So you will have, so each feature will represent the hidden layer, sorry, input layer. So 1, 2, if there are 4 features, there'll be 4 input layers. There'll be at least one hidden layer, which will have the number of neurons, and then the hidden layer 1, 2, and then the output layer, which will give you the output value, right? So you typically have an interconnected layer. So you will have the input is connected to various hidden layers, neurons, and you will have weights which are assigned to each of these features, which will help us, and those weights are adjusted. I'll come to how the weights are adjusted. The main idea is, how do you get a predicted output value which should match the actual value? That means, how do you minimize the cost function? The same thing we talked about cost function, the concept here, how do you minimize the cost function? Okay, this we talked about. So now there is something called activation function, and activation function is mainly used to limit the value of the output. Okay, and there are various activation functions which are used in different layers. At the you use it in the hidden layer, you use it in the output layer. Okay, so activation functions are used essentially to introduce non-linear properties in the neural network, and also to limit the values of the output, right? And there are various activation functions. If you have known, there is something called softmax or threshold, which is used to typically use for classification, and in the output layer, where the output layer is binary, either 0, 1, or multi-class probabilistic. Multi-class probabilistic is, suppose you have a value of a ball, which could be red, green, or blue, then the probability of one could be 30%, probability of the output could be red is 40%, and probability of green could be another 30%. So total makes up to 100%. So that is called multi-probabilistic output, right? So use threshold function there. You use, this is an example of how you use activation function. So you have weights, various weights assigned to the inputs. You do an activation functions, and okay, this is an example of an activation function where it says that the value, if it will be 0, or 1. That means if the value is greater than 0, it will be 1. And if it is less than, if it is greater than equal to 0, it is 1. And if it's 0, if 0 is less greater than x. Okay, that means if x is less than 0, it will be value 0. So this is how you find out the, using the activation functions, you find out the final value, or you limit the value of the output. Then you also have sigmoid function, which is again used for classification output layer, but this is mainly used for binary class probability. That means where you have the values of 0 and 1. The most important is the rectified linear unit, which is used in the hidden functions, or is called the hidden layers, and it gives you either the maximum of the value of fx. So if the fx value is less than, if the fx is greater than 0, it will take the value of 0. It will take the value, actual value of fx. And if it is less than 0, it will take the value of 0. So it is either a maximum of x or 0. That is how the rectifier function works. This is activation function hyperbolic tangent, which is typically used for natural language processing and speech recognitions. It's used in the RNN networks. So I'm not going to get into that. Linear activation functions is used in your regression functions. Right? Whenever you're using a regression function for neural networks, you use the linear activation function in your hidden layers. Sorry, in the output layers. Okay. So these are the various ways. Okay. This is the various. Now, what I'm trying to explain here is this forward propagation, backward propagation. While you must be aware, I will just quickly run through what is this. So what happens is, initially, as I told you, your cost function has to be minimum. So initially, you take some weights, you initialize the value of the weights. So here it could be W1, W2, W3. And those weights are applied. Okay, you do the activation functions in the middle layer. This is one hidden layer, or this is the output layer. Now, when you do a forward propagation, you get a predicted output, and the output is compared with the actual output. If there is an error, there is something called the learning rate. The learning rate will decide how much your weights should be adjusted. The learning rate will decide how much the weights have to be adjusted during the backward propagation so that you get the lowest cost function. So every time you do a one iteration, you do a forward propagation, you adjust the weight based on the, so based on the error, the learning rate, there's a learning rate, that learning rate will adjust the weights in such a way that it will try to optimize, or it will try to minimize the cost function. Okay. We already know this gradient descent. I want to talk to you about gradient descent and stochastic gradient descent. So this is a very important, which is used in the industry today. So what I do is, if I have got 100 records of data, training data, I will do a backward pop. I will take a batch of data. Maybe I will take 5 records, 10 records. I'll take the first 5 records. I will do the forward backward propagation. Okay, see the output. Okay, I will adjust the learning rate. The learning rate will change based on the error, and the learning rate will again adjust the weights in such a way, and the weights will decide how to activate the neuron. So it's basically the learning rate which decides the weights, and the weights will decide how much to activate the neurons, right? And then based on that, you will again do a backward propagation and find out you'll update the weights and do a backward propagation. So you are doing it either, you can either do it for the complete set of data, you will update the weights at the end of all the data, or you can update the weights at every batch of data. And when you complete the entire cycle of data, you complete one epoch. After one epoch, again, you go through another round of full iterations by adjusting the learning rate, the weights are getting adjusted. Again, you round the same. You do the third epoch, you do the fourth epoch. So you decide the number of epochs, and then you calculate the accuracy. Okay. So this is a very important slide, which I always show. See, first of all, initialize the weights to some small numbers. Input the first observation of your data set in the input layer. Each feature is one input node. Forward propagation from left to right. The neurons are activated in the way that the impact of each neuron's activation is limited by the weights. Propagate the activation until getting the predicted value y. Compare the predicted value to the actual result. That means you measure the generated error or the cost function. Your cost function or the mean square error, what we call it. Backward propagation from right to left. The error is backward propagated. Update the weights according to how much they're responsible for the error. The learning rate decides by how much we need to update the weights. So every time you do iteration, the learning rate will decide how much the weights to be adjusted. Repeat these steps after each observation. Either you can do for observations or after a batch of observations. That means you can do a batch size. That's where we use stochastic gradient. Okay, and when the training set passes through the complete ANN, that makes into one epoch. And you can do this cycle for any number of epochs. So an epoch is a complete pass through a given data set. So you run through multiple epochs and you find out the accuracy. So what I will do is I'm going to use Keras and TensorFlow. That is the most important libraries in Google, which helps in deep learning in ANN. And I'll run a particular script and show you. So let me just initialize this. Okay, let me change my datasets folder. Let me not save this. Okay, I'm in this files. And this is my, oh, sorry, I selected the wrong folder, my mistake. I need to go back to this. I need to go to artificial neural networks. And then I have a file called ann.py. And this is a data set. Now, this data set says this is basically a banking data. And the banking data sets, it says that you have a number of parameters about the customer, the credit card he uses, the bank balance, the salary he has. And we want to analyze using a model, what is the probability a person is going to leave the bank or not going to leave the bank. Okay, so we are basically finding out the churning rate. So you will have two values, either 0 or 1. 0 means is likely to exit the bank, and 1 means, sorry, 0 means he's not going to exit the bank, and 1 means he's going to exit the bank. Okay, so this is how you want to use a ANN model to find out for this classification data how the model is using the stochastic gradient descent, how to calculate the accuracy. So what I'm going to do here, I will go back here. Again, I will use it. So now in this case, row number, customer ID, surname does not make any sense. So I don't take this as my independent variable. I'll take the independent variable from credit score, and you will see here geography and gender. Geography and gender, these are the two alphabetic or the text values. So I'll have to do data pre-processing. As part of data pre-processing, I need to do the data characterization, which I will show you here. So I will import my libraries first. I will import my data set. So if I go to my data set, this is how my data set looks, right? So I have the various fields here, and exited 1 means is going to exit the bank, and 0 means is not going to exit the bank. Okay. And then I take the values of X from the credit score and Y. So your X is starting from my credit score, and the Y is my 0 and 1, whether it's going to exit or not exit. So I'm going to use label encoder and X encoder on my age. and also I'm going to use it on my this. So I'm going to use it. So now if I go in value of X, okay, everything is now converted into numeric. So everything will get converted into a numeric format. Now, what I will do is I will split the data again. This again remains the same. I do the feature scaling, same thing. Now here, I'm going to start using ANN. So I'm going to import few libraries called Keras, Sequential, and Dense. Okay, these are the three important libraries. So let me do that. So here, the various parameters that you need to try out with is number one, number of epochs, number two, number of hidden layers, and number three, number of neurons in a layer. So these are the three parameters you are going to vary and check for accuracy. So again, there is a lot of combinations you can try to give you the most optimum output, right? So let this get executed. And typically for large processing, right, we CPU generally will not work because it will make it very, very slow. You generally use a graphical process unit, okay, high processing computers for processing such complex nonlinear data. Okay, so you have done this. Then I initialize my ANN. Okay, then here I'm creating my first hidden layer. So I'm saying I'm taking 6 neurons. I'm using activation ReLU and input dimensions 12. That means there are 12 features, x1 to x12. So I'm using input dimensions. So there'll be 12 features in my input layer. So this is creating the first hidden layer. Then I decide to select the second hidden layer. Again, I take now this Adam. Sorry. So this second add layer. So this is my units equal to 6. I take 6 neurons. I again use activation equal to ReLU, and I create this second hidden layer. Then I create the output layer. So output layer, I'm having one neuron. I will use activation equal to sigmoid because I've got only 1, 0 or 1, only binary value. Okay, so I select this. And here I'm doing the compilation of the ANN where I'm going to calculate the accuracy and the error, right? And now I'm going to use this particular function. I'm using batch size equal to 10. I'm going to train the model with 800 records are there. I will take 10 records at a time. That means it will run 80 times, and it will run 100 epochs. So 100 full iterations will happen. So one epoch, second epoch. Now, if you see as the number of epochs increases, the accuracy tends to increase. So once I train my model, then again I will predict my Y output and I'll calculate the confusion matrix. Okay. Now, once I've calculated this, let me predict my output. I round my Y predict to either 0 or 1. I calculate my accuracy. So my accuracy comes to 84%. So I will again try with increasing the number of hidden layers, or I will try to increase the number of epochs and try out various options as parameters and see wherever I get the highest accuracy. And this is how we run ANN for a classification data set. Any questions on this? What is this? In the meantime, is there any meaning in the different colors for cells in data view? What is this exactly? I think this is the host and panelists. What does this mean? Anyways, I think I have completed my session. Any questions before we wind up? When you show the data in top right corner is where I'm actually changing the folder. This is where I change the path where I'm going to execute the script. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Any questions? Can you show the data set? This is my data set. Okay, let me show you the data set. This is the data set. So 1, 2. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so you have got 12. This, then obviously you have done the data characterization also. Okay, and this is my output. The color difference is coming just to highlight. I don't know how it is. It is taken care by the Python itself. I don't know how it is happening within that. Okay. So any questions? Is this something you guys have understood? I mean, does it, this sessions have been fruitful for all of you? Okay, you have got some good understanding. Very good. So I will share with you all this with you, and I will share with sir, and then he can pass it on to you so you can practice it. And whenever you get some time, please install Anaconda Navigator, and I'm sure many of you may be having it, and you can try running this code. And I will also share this ANN code with you so that you can try out various combinations of hidden layers, epochs, and see the accuracy, right? Yes, I'm going to do that along with the PPT also. So, okay, sir, I'm done, sir. Pankaj, sir, I'm done. So you want to close up?
Okay, sir. Any participants having any query, they can ask in the chat box, or they raise their hand so that I can unmute from here, or so that they can ask directly from the sir. Any question, they can raise their hand. Vijay Lakshmi ma'am is having some question. Okay, let me unmute her. Vijay Lakshmi ma'am, you can ask the question. Vijay Lakshmi ma'am, you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question from the sir. Vijay Lakshmi ma'am, you have raised your hand. You can ask the question from the sir. I have unmuted from here. You can unmute from your side. Dr. Susil Narang has also raised questions. Susil sir, you can also ask the question.
Sir, I just wanted to ask, like, can you share a little bit of code, like how you can create a regression problem using this ANN? Like, I've never tried that.
Yeah, I have a regression data set also. I will share that with you. Is there with me. While I'm not, because of shortage of time, there is one car purchase. This one. This is on Jupyter Notebook.
Okay.
If you guys have Jupyter Notebook, you can run this. I will share this also with you.
So is it solved using ANN only, sir?
ANN and linear activation.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, that will be.
I will show that. I will share this also. You can go through the code.
Thank you so much, sir. It would be very
Vijay
fruitful
Lakshmi ma'am, I'm
lecture.
again asking you if you are having any question, you can ask, sir. Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir, for speaking at 1 week Atal FDP organized by Rumta College of Engineering and Technology, Bhilai. Your presentation was very knowledgeable and was very well received by our participant. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, all of you. All the best. I'll send you the session by tonight or by tomorrow, sir. Yeah, all the details.
Yes, sir.
I will share these files by either today evening or by tomorrow morning.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can share with the Dr. Pankaj Misra, sir.
I will do that. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
sir. Thank you very much. Dear participants, we are having the next session scheduled at 12:30 p.m. Okay, we are having 30 minutes more and we will be taking 30 minutes break and we will continue from 12:30. So I request you to rejoin again at 12:30. We will be having next speaker with us. Will be there delivering his presentation at 12:30. Thank you all. Thank you very much.